A threesome request gone wrong. Let me preface this by saying nothing like this has ever happened before, which is what left me so utterly flabbergasted, as I had a lot of trust in our relation. My husband, we'll call him Steve, and I planned to get married in Vegas with an entourage last year. But due to COVID, we got courthouse married last year, and did our wedding in Vegas this year for our 1-year anniversary. We like to have fun, so our Vegas plans did include hitting a strip club. The day before our wedding, we were all supposed to go to the club together, but I drank too much and was confined to bed. So my husband and some friends hit the strip club, and I stayed at the hotel. Cool, no big deal. He didn't come home until 7 a.m. Still cool, not ideal to get married on no sleep, but if it doesn't bother him, it doesn't bother me. He gets home and starts talking about 2 strippers he met. One who wants to come to our wedding, we'll call her Stella. She told him she didn't want to be weird and she had a boyfriend, but our wedding sounded cool and she wanted to come. Again, cool, we had the room as it wasn't a formal wedding. And what's a Vegas wedding without a stripper from the night before? Then he tells me about the other stripper who he thinks wanted to have a threesome with us because she said his wife sounded hot and he invited her to the wedding also. I didn't really say much to that. He's mentioned wanting to have a threesome before and it has never been off the table, but we have only really discussed briefly and vaguely, like we might do that someday. He also got both of their numbers to send them the wedding info, but that is where things start to go downhill. For a majority of the time leading up to the wedding, we didn't spend our time separate before the wedding since we are already married. He is talking about how he really thinks they're going to show up, and he can't believe strippers are coming to our wedding. Like, he talked about almost nothing else. Not the greatest vibe for a bride on her wedding day, who is expecting to be her husband's main focus. But it didn't bother me much at the time, because I assumed he was just excited, and maybe a little high on Vegas. Wedding time rolls around, and Stella actually shows. She's gorgeous and sweet, and we decide we might visit her at the club later that night, since I missed out the night before and was a little bummed. We part ways and head out to take our wedding portraits, and my husband is still talking about Stella, but now it's about what club she will be at, and when later that evening. At one point, he even referred to her as his Vegas girlfriend to our friends, which made me uneasy, but I laughed it off as a joke and again figured he was high on Vegas. We head to dinner, and husband is sucked into his phone, barely speaking to me, and still managing to rush me to meet up with our friends to go see Stella. We meet up with our friends, bar hop for a bit, then head to Stella's club, with the expectation that we'll stay for an hour because at late everyone is pretty beat. We get there, and after about 10 minutes, Stella comes over to hang out. Steve wants to get a couple's lap dance. I tell him I don't want to, but to go without me. I would prefer to sit back and tip the girls dancing on the pole, as I am very sober, couldn't drink after partying too hard the day before, and at this point, feeling a little awkward, as my husband seems very into Stella. After several minutes of being talked into it by Stella and Steve, I uncomfortably agree, and we head back. The dance starts and I'm that person that doesn't know what to do with my hands, and I'm waiting for it to end. Stella tries her best to make me feel at ease, joking and complimenting me, but it just makes me feel more awkward. Well, that and Steve asking me more than once why I'm being awkward. After several minutes, I leave before the dance is over, but tell them to finish, and they do. Several minutes later, they come back to the group. Stella perches on my chair and tells me that Steve told her we wanted to have a threesome. Then she apologetically told me doesn't do that with customers. I'm mortified for several reasons. Because he crossed that professional line and it was disrespectful, especially because he knows she has a boyfriend. He made it sound like I was in on it. Arguably the most important, this man asked someone to have a threesome without discussing it with me. At all. On our wedding night. At this point, we've been here about an hour, and our friend group decided to leave. All of us. Except my husband. He opted to stay at the strip club alone, with the girl who just shot him down for a threesome, while all of his friends and his wife went back to the hotel. To be fair, he did ask me if it was okay, and I said it was, because at this point, I don't have it in me to explain to this man all the ways he has disrespected me. He gets home an hour or two later, and asks me if I'm mad, and I unleash on him. But I don't get far before he cuts me off by continuously saying, "I'm sorry, I'm an asshole," until I stop even trying to talk about it. We go to bed, and in the morning he tells me he apologized to Stella and deleted her contact info. We leave for our 5-day honeymoon and don't discuss it again, except for once when he informs me that Stella appreciated the apology, but said it wasn't necessary and that she wants us to come see her next time we're in Vegas. Great. I spent our honeymoon either stoned, not a healthy crutch, I know, but it was the only thing that made it bearable, which allowed me to occasionally forget the incident, or silently fuming, wondering if I was overreacting, afraid to go off if this wasn't actually as big of a deal as I thought it was, because he obviously didn't think it was. He asked me multiple times if I was okay. Every time I gave a half-hearted fine. We returned home, and I told my best friend the story, because I needed to talk to someone about it, and I needed her to tell me if all of the concerns were in my head and I was overreacting. She confirmed that my concerns were valid, I was not overreacting. That night, I confronted my husband and actually got to speak. When I finished, he apologized. He said he thought a threesome was what I wanted because I was excited when he brought it up earlier that day. No, I wasn't. He said he knew he fucked up but didn't bring it up sooner because he thought I wanted to wait until after vacation to discuss it. Right? Why wouldn't I want this to hang over our vacation like a rain cloud instead of working through it? What should I do? I thought this man was my future. We have dogs together, and we're discussing kids. I don't want to give up on it so easily, but I don't know if I can get past this. It's not just what he did in Vegas, it's how he behaved afterwards. Second update. As harsh as some of you were not wrong. I should have stood up for myself long before we got to the point of him soliciting a threesome. Here's a few things about me that may make it more understandable. I have long been aware that I have boundary issues in all areas of my life, and that it is something I need to work on. Trust me, this was definitely the push I needed to get the ball rolling and actually seek help. I am also awful at confrontation, and again, I am well aware that I need to work on it. I have experienced trauma in my life, and had been experiencing some serious mental health and self-esteem issues even before this happened. When I get upset, I shut down completely. Again, I am aware this is not a healthy response and will be working on it, but that is where I am currently. Despite my trauma, I am a naturally trusting person. I am going to trust you completely until you give me a reason not to. And as hard as it may be to believe, my husband had not given me a reason not to trust him before this point. I don't believe in explaining to people who claim to love me how to treat me well and not disrespect me. If you know and love me, you should know how to act like it. Obviously for minor issues, they may not know, but I'm sorry, this one seems like a no-brainer. Consent 101 is anything other than an enthusiastic yes. It can be nonverbal but should be an obvious yes. Actually consent? Is asking someone to do something after they say no and until they say yes actually consent? Thank you to everyone that took the time to read this post and reply with love, tough love, and even disdain. You've given me a lot to think about and process in therapy. Yes, I have entered therapy. I have also insisted my husband enter therapy if he wants any chance for this marriage to work. At some point after working on ourselves, if it makes sense, we will come together to work on our relationship to see if it is salvageable. I have told only my best friend the dirty details of what happened and plan to keep it that way because I know that once people hear something like this, it changes how you look at a relationship. And if we are going to make it work, this incident is better off not shouted from the rooftops. I have not ended our marriage yet, for a few reasons. This was not entirely my husband's fault. He can take a majority of the blame, but not all. If I do not at least try, I will always wonder, what if something caused him to act this way? Maybe if was his attraction to another woman, maybe it was a concern he had about me, himself, or our relationship that manifested in an ugly way. I would like to know where this came from, and if it is likely to happen again before making any permanent decisions. Something in me thought that all of the disrespect leading up to the pitch of the threesome was acceptable, and I need to investigate why that is to have any hope of having successful relationship moving forward. For the record though, threesomes and children are off the table until further notice. Threesomes will not be discussed again until I decide it is time. Children will not be discussed until it is deemed we are at a healthy place by a professional, if ever. Update 3. Following the most embarrassing moment of my life to open the door for even more embarrassment. The masochist in me got positively tingly at the hateful comments and continuing a relationship that everyone on Reddit, myself included, knew was doomed. No amount of supportive comments could stop me from being terrified at ending my relationship. We obviously aren't happy, but we are damn comfortable. Too comfortable. We have 3 dogs, we have a house that he owns in only his name. And I have a good bit of debt and a job with no health insurance. I was too overwhelmed to face all of those challenges and come to terms with my marriage being over, so I gave up the little self-respect I had and stayed. I tried to work on my issues, work on us, and see if our relationship is salvageable. Spoiler alert, and I'm sure this will shock you, it isn't. There is just no shaking the feeling that he just doesn't really care about me, beyond what I represent about him to other people. He's happy to sing my praises about being his pretty cool, laid-back wife to anyone who will listen. Yeah, motherfuckers, you called the cool girl thing, congrats. Except me. To me, he is almost exclusively critical. I pretty much always feel I am failing. We have rarely had sex, and when we did, it felt selfish and disconnected. He loves being a romantic for the sake of a story to tell, but you won't catch him caring about my needs unless I'm blowing up and demanding 2 of my least favorite things. And then suddenly, there's a sense of urgency. He was all ready to do couples counseling after Vegas to save our marriage, until I stopped being actively mad all the time. We never made it to a single session. The one time I worked up the nerve to bring it up, he changed the subject as soon as he could, and we haven't discussed it since. When I decided to stay, I told myself I would give it a year. If I wasn't happy and feeling like we were making progress, then I was done. Our anniversary is in just over 2 weeks, and I am no more ready than I was to face the challenges this will bring. But a deal is a deal. So here I am, asking for encouragement and advice, especially if you know anything about divorce in PA, because that shit is overwhelming. As harsh as some of you were not wrong. I should have stood up for myself long before we got to the point of him soliciting a threesome. Here's a few things about me that may make it more understandable. I have long been aware that I have boundary issues in all areas of my life, and that it is something I need to work on. Trust me, this was definitely the push I needed to get the ball rolling and actually seek help. I am also awful at confrontation, and again, I am well aware that I need to work on it. I have experienced trauma in my life, and had been experiencing some serious mental health and self-esteem issues even before this happened. When I get upset, I shut down completely. Again, I am aware this is not a healthy response and will be working on it, but that is where I am currently. Despite my trauma, I am a naturally trusting person. I am going to trust you completely until you give me a reason not to. And as hard as it may be to believe, my husband had not given me a reason not to trust him before this point. I don't believe in explaining to people who claim to love me how to treat me well and not disrespect me. If you know and love me, you should know how to act like it. Obviously for minor issues, they may not know, but I'm sorry this one seems like a no-brained. Consent 101 is anything other than an enthusiastic yes. It can be non-verbal but should be an obvious yes. Actually consent is asking someone to do something after they say no and until they say yes, actually consent. Thank you to everyone that took the time to read this post and reply with love, tough love, and even disdain. You've given me a lot to think about and process in therapy. Yes, I have entered therapy. I have also insisted my husband enter therapy if he wants any chance for this marriage to work. At some point after working on ourselves, if it makes sense, we will come together to work on our relationship to see if it is salvageable.